Today we want to think about how did these messages come to be missing in much of today's Christianity. Because if we understand that, then we can be careful ourselves. And aspects of the truth missing in our churches and in our lives, and I believe there are. There could be portions in our Bible that are like that. Portions that we neglect, portions that we don't take seriously. It's very easy to see what's missing in other people, but much more important is to see what's missing in us. So when we see something missing in others, that reminds us that perhaps something is missing in us. It's like when you find that somebody is very difficult to bear with because of his peculiar mannerisms or habits, or sometimes husband and wife get married, they're brought up in two different ways of life in their homes, and they come together and they're very difficult to adjust to each other because 25 years they have lived in some other way. And now they have to try and live together, and it's very easy for one to get irritated with the other because they're not doing it the way this person was brought up all their life. And that person is irritated with the first person because he's not doing it the way she was brought up. And everybody's got this foolish idea that, of course, my way is right. And that's where all the problem arises. So one of the things, it can happen in a church where you find it difficult to bear with a brother because he's always doing things in a certain way that irritates you. Sometimes it can be just the tone of his voice that irritates you. And that happens sometimes in husband-wife relationships where the tone of voice itself irritates the partner. And one of the things that has helped me is to recognize that, I know God showed me this years ago, that when I have to bear with a brother, he probably is unconscious of what he's doing that bothers me. He's just living his normal life the way he lived for 20, 30 years. But something in that way of life irritates me all the time, but he's not aware of it. And therefore, I must be merciful to him. And the other thing the Lord taught me was that if he is like that, it's quite likely there may be something in me which irritates him, which I'm unconscious of, and which he is bearing with me very patiently, very silently. And that has helped me to love my brothers. And I tell you, you husbands and wives, it'll help you to love one another. When you find something in your partner which really bugs you, bothers you, consider two things. One, he or she may be totally unaware of it. That's the way they were brought up. You happen to be brought up in a different way. Secondly, there is something in you which you are unaware of it, which bothers him or her. And they are bearing with it silently. None of us are perfect. So, if we recognize this, it'll help us. So, the same way in our church, we need to see, Lord, what are the areas of Scripture that we are neglecting in our church? Search your heart. And very often people say we are related to CFC. We come to the conferences because we are connected with CFC. Well, I'll tell you something. In the different churches which are related to us, not all are equally spiritual. Just because we are connected to CFC doesn't mean you're a spiritual church. Spirituality in a church depends on its leader. That's what we read in Revelation chapter 2 and chapter 3. If there are missing messages in a certain church, it's because the leader has not got those things in his life. Every church becomes like its leader. It's just like children. When children are born, you can see the image of the father or the mother, or both of them usually, in that child. And more than that, the father and mother can have certain hidden sicknesses in their blood, and that gets transmitted to the child. And If both father and mother have the same sickness in their blood, that gets transmitted to the child. The child looks very healthy, but there's something problem in their blood. It's exactly the same in a church. If two elders have the same weakness, they will produce children with that weakness. It may be hidden for a long time, but it will manifest itself. In other words, if two elders love money, they're going to have a church where people love money. Or if two elders are worldly, then it'll produce a church which is worldly. The reason we have two elders is so that at least one will balance out the other. And generally speaking, when a father has a particular sickness in his blood, the mother usually doesn't have it. That's why they say you shouldn't marry close relatives, because then there's a greater possibility of the sickness being transmitted in the blood. But otherwise, generally speaking, father and mother may have different sicknesses that cancel out each other. It's exactly the same why we have two elders in a church and not one pastor, because they balance out each other, and one person's weaknesses take care of the other person's weakness take care of it, and there's less chance of deception. There's less chance of having a torn Bible, because unless one elder is a blind follower of the other, never expresses his opinion. Unfortunately, there could be some elders like that, who never express their opinion. They just say, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. Such a person should resign from eldership and go and sit in the back of the church. He's useless. Because the whole purpose of double eldership is that one person can say, hey, I don't agree with that. Brother, I love you very much and I'm going to be in fellowship with you till Jesus comes, but I don't agree with that. Sorry. You know, that's the type of mature fellowship that we need to have among elders. And even among husband and wife. If you get a wife who just say yes sir, yes sir, yes sir to you, that's a useless wife. God gave Adam a wife who was a helper to him. How can she be a helper if she doesn't correct him where he's wrong? I mean, if Adam's got a black mark on his face from some charcoal or something, and he says, darling, is my face okay? Oh, yes, sir, your face is perfectly okay. Is she a helper? And the same way, if there's some other defect worse than a charcoal mark on your face, it could be something worse in your personality or character. I hope you have a wife who tells you, listen, honey, there is something wrong in the way you do these things. You know, I'll tell you, other people won't tell you, but there it is. And it's wonderful if you can have an elder brother in a church who tells another person, you know, brother, I think you're very abrasive in the way you speak. You make a lot of enemies, the way you do it. I mean, you got to tone that down a little bit. Or another person may say, in another situation, one elder may say, brother, you are just a compromiser. You just want to please everybody in the church. Or you're partial. That's not right. You know, we need to help one another. And we are afraid to say these things because we are afraid our fellowship will break. Then it is pathetic. You know, like a newly married couple, they have a period called the honeymoon. In the honeymoon, they'll never say anything wrong about each other. You're so nice, and everything is so beautiful, and you're so pretty, you're perfect. How am I, darling? You're perfect, honey, etc. That goes on for a period. But that's all deception. I mean, that's because we don't know each other. You may love each other, but it's an unproven love. But show me a couple that have really loved each other for 30 years, been honest with each other. They're not afraid to tell the truth to each other. They're not afraid, oh, they'll divorce me, she'll divorce me, or he'll divorce me. No, it's a proven love. We can help one another. That's the relationship we must have in the church. And that's what protects us from deception. Because that person sees something which I don't see. And if I'm humble enough to accept it, I can be protected from deception. So, these missing things in different churches, including ours, don't think we can exclude ours. There is no perfect church on the face of the earth. And ours also may lack something. So as I said, just because some church, some part of India is linked to us, doesn't mean that's a spiritual church. And shall I surprise you by telling you something? You'll get a big surprise when you hear this. When some brother from Bangalore is transferred to another place, and we have a church in that place, you know what I tell him? I tell him, we have a church there, you can go there. But if you find that church doesn't help you to grow spiritually and become a disciple of Jesus, and you find another church there, maybe another Pentecostal church or a charismatic church, where you find the pastor, maybe they don't have the correct pattern like we have, but the pastor there is a God-fearing man, challenges you to be a disciple. Brother, don't go to the church connected with CFC. Go to that church. I'll tell you, I say that publicly, my loyalty is not to CFC. My loyalty is to Jesus Christ. And if in a particular town, one church related to us is worldly, and some brother goes there and says, well, that's a worldly church, I don't want to go there, and he finds another church better than that, I say, go there. I won't stop you. I'm not here to sponsor and support worldly elders just because they are connected with CFC. I want people to be disciples of Jesus. I don't want them to be connected to us in some type of denominational relationship. I'm against denominations. I finished with denominations years ago, and I want to tell you, if CFC becomes a denomination, I'll have nothing to do with it. We're interested in building local churches. We have fellowship, but we're not a denomination. Denominations get corrupt.